monasticism. I've always had a certain admiration for monastics, but I really liked your suggestion that those of us in the world have, in a sense, more temptations, and we can actually grow even more than the ascetics. But I assume that one thing that the ascetics really struggle with, perhaps even more than us, is thinking, thoughts, because they have their thoughts all day long as they're doing whatever they go about doing. And so many of our clients, especially with anxiety and depression, have a lot of trouble with their thoughts. And so, as you know, there's been a popularity of mindfulness meditation, for instance, trying to get people stay in the moment and so on. But I wonder what your suggestion is for the aesthetic life, for those folks who are struggling with a lot of unwanted thoughts, and how we might be able to use those suggestions with some of our clients.
First off, I would want to say, be sure you see the book that Father Alex of Caracalla, I forget his last name, in the world wrote on cognitive behavioral therapy and the fathers. But it's a good book on that. Alex Trader, that's his name. Both life and so-called in the world, I mean, they're both in the world, they're just in the world differently, the monastic. First, let me be sure I get your question. I need to repeat that. Your question is, the monastics struggle primarily, you're saying, with thoughts, their inner world.
Well, they have less temptations in a way. I've always thought, in a sense, their life is easier than ours because they have less temptation.
They have a different form of temptation, and concentrated in a certain area of the arena. In the world, I would say we all have the same temptations, but the way we encounter them are different. A monk, say, is not going to be dealing with sexuality, so they have a certain temptation to, in order not to be overcome by sexual thoughts, they may become misogynistic without realizing it, or they may cut off. They may do something sort of like Origen did, maybe not literally castrating themselves, but castrating themselves in a way that makes them inhuman. And then they give bad advice to married couples because they're not able to fully be present in love and they don't have experience. This is a bad mistake. And there are errors you can make as a monastic, and there are errors you can make as a person in the world not to appreciate, say, some of what it means to actually be still. But if you don't make that mistake, and you, as St. Paisios, who actually, he got to fight in the war and all, he became a monk who realized monks have to watch out that they don't have a hard heart. Since they don't face some of the difficulties of life, they may not develop a love for people that's heartbreaking. And you have to have pain of heart for someone. So in that sense, if someone's truly called to monasticism, they're called to the struggle in the heart that Jesus pointed us to, that it's not about washing cups and pots if you don't wash the heart. It's the heart that's got to be brought before God. So in the world, I think what's comparable to the mistake that the monks can make is that we fail to realize that we have to be still to notice anything and have a choice. So we just move on through our lives and we don't actually notice our interpretations of things. We don't notice the thoughts. We don't notice how we assent to them. We don't even know what we're feeling. If something comes into me that is thymos, if I get, say I'm angry, I don't even know it. I just blast you and call you names. Then I am the affect. I don't have a feeling. That person doesn't have a feeling. They are their affect. To have a feeling, I would have to be present to this and have, if we use psychological terms, mentalizing affectivity. I'd have to have the capacity to remain present, to stop before the experience of the enlivening of me in reaction to what's going on. I'd have to identify the interpretation that is occurring coinciding with the sensation, and then from the poise of that moment, I would make a choice. This is the ascetical part of it, because the choice will be difficult, because I really want to clobber you, but I'm not going to do it. That is ascetical struggle. Now the monks have that, because brother so-and-so is irritating the heck out of the other one. And this is going on in the monastery. We just don't know it. We think of all the peace, but it's there. I don't know if I'm catching the full import of that. I want to give you a follow-up before I move.
It's really the thinking part that I want to hone in on.
What is your question about the thinking part?
How to control unwanted thoughts.
Oh, we can't control thoughts in that sense. No one can control them, but the fathers teach that that's not the problem. St. Paisios says, it's a bird flying through your mind, don't make a nest for it. This is the key. There's no sin in having a blasphemous thought or anything else that comes through. It's the place where I start to have attachment to it and begin to give in to it. If you're using a CBT approach with someone, you're bringing their attention to the thought, you're helping them become mindful. Now, you've got to watch and see if when you do this, they take it with a mechanical part of their mind that won't be able to do much with it. But if they start to realize that the noticing of thoughts comes from a deeper sense of embodiment, then they're going to start getting experiences of being more fully present, and they will have a choice about their thoughts. One last thought on this. I forget where I read this, but it was very good. If sometimes when something's bothering you and somebody says, "Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy," it actually makes it worse. Because you're doing this in a mechanical, disembodied way, while another part of you is like that dog in the cartoons, smells the hamburger and is just headed right over to it. What you want to do is drop down and find something you're grateful for, get a real connection with Christ, out of which, if you were to intend Lord Jesus Christ, it would have the meaning and from that gratefulness. And when gratefulness happens, something opens up that actually can be monitored with the coherence of the beating between the heart, how the heart's beat changes. You can pull a machine on and monitor this. The way to deal with the thoughts is to change the heart. And then the thoughts can be dealt with differently. But if you ignore this part and just try to fight it up here, we can't beat it in that way. So again, I think this would connect to embodiment, very important. And CBT has a place out of mindfulness, and the fathers understood this, so they didn't just say do battle with thoughts. They said, be still, bring your noose inside your body, and let it wander out here all over the place and not be responsible for it. Bring it in. This means the deepest part of the mind, the contemplative part, has become embodied. And then there's a palpableness to the thoughts that cannot be recognized in the same way when I'm fragmented and I don't have any attention.
What is CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy. This man, the two psychologists over here in disguise, so I was changing my language. I had secret intel. Sorry.
Thank you for that.
Is he a plant?
Is he a plant?
No, he's serious about his question.
We may need to get your number.
Okay,
I want to follow up on that.
you want to follow up on that? All right, we'll go with that.
So, I want to get back to, as a therapist, we're thinking about being with the patient and the method. And so when he's talking about the mindfulness meditation as another technique that is very popular now, I guess I heard in the question of how do you integrate that with the Christian approach to working with someone? Because that comes, in the proper form, it's very Eastern mysticism and all that kind of stuff.
That's a good question, and that would be there's a lot to say on that, but in the simplest way, so much of prayer and mindfulness and this word spirituality, which I don't like, it's sort of like personality. I'd rather meet the person than the personality, and I don't really. Spirituality, I don't know what that is. It sort of seems to me evasive. But I have a group for my counseling residents that we meet every week at 4 o'clock on Thursdays, and they come into the room. Most of the time we start with in a silence and stillness. They don't move their bodies, they sit absolutely still. Sometimes we do the Jesus prayer in common, like at Father Sophronius monastery. At other times I may give them some little exercise as they're still, to make sure they can notice the difference between sensation, feeling, thinking, imagination. They're usually tired when they come in. It's the end of the day. They may have a headache. They're worried about their clients. So I want them to see that within 5 to 10 minutes, it's possible to, if you intentionally turn toward embodying, bringing your nous inside your body and be still, that you can have not only a refreshment, and you can see that the tensions in the body and inside we're being drained by the cares of the world. That even happens in our therapy, our empathic connection and all. I start to worry. I get. So the cares of the world start to lead me toward what, if I didn't change it, would be burnout. But every time we have the cherubic hymn, we're being invited into that stillness. Let go and become in the eternal present moment. Let all mortal flesh be still, keep silence. The King of Glory is about to appear. So mindfulness from the Christian standpoint includes the ascetical foundations of mind-body unity of most of the other traditions. But it's within a relational context and with the ontological, uncreated person of God. This is very different than, say, the Buddhist understanding of it. And Elder Sophrony speaks about that from his experience, too, in terms of not confusing the infinite sense of bliss of the larger human hypostasis with having crossed the sea to God. This can be a deep beguilement at a very high level of meditation. So I like to stir people away from confusing mindfulness with a Calgon bath, or just relax and mantra, because this is very psychic, and it is a different resting place in the sensual life, and can involve beguilement. But when you have sobriety, and you are still, and the nous is brought inside, and then you wait on the Lord with gratefulness, even the breathing is a gift. And the heart is behind the lungs, and the air comes in and is transmitted by the heart to every cell in the body. This is almost like a created icon of the transmission of grace into the dust and the creation of human beings. So Christian prayer and mindfulness are as different, arguably, from all the other faiths that move toward this as the Christ is from any other so-called salvation, which does not prize the embodied life as the vessel of the Holy Spirit. There is nothing that says, I love every particle of the creation and will fill it with my divine breath. No, we might dissolve in the absolute, give up our personhood, which is really, in one sense, and I don't mean to demean any religion here, I'm just saying that to me that's not even love. If the only way I can be loved is to dissolve me, so that there's nothing of me anymore. But what if love is, I'm dissolved and remain? What if love is the offering as Christ offers himself totally and remains who he is, paradoxically? This goes beyond any kind of man-made meditative experience into something interpersonal, not in a social way, but in a hypostatic way that is beyond comprehension. And that's why we're so afraid of it. The bottom line is, I'm afraid of how much love and life Christ gives me, wants to give me. And I'm running from it. But I'm also running to it, like you. And thus we're in the middle of something. If we get that taste, we know the difference between meditation and prayer. Prayer risks everything. Meditation just might help the press secretary become the most highly cultured mind, alpha wave producing mind in the universe. And that would be hell. Although, I should say this too, if we were to follow the Neptic Fathers and actually be still, we would grow an orbital frontal cortex that would be larger than the normal one. Other parts of our brain would change, which can be verified. The meditative states do this. And this is the place that helps us switch out of negative emotions, helps us recognize people's faces and have empathy. So the brain structure of people who are formed in Orthodox Christianity is going to be different than the brain structure of someone who becomes enslaved to addiction. A very different brain. Why would we not expect the body itself to be changed by grace? We would. And now we have some verification for this, which is very interesting. Somebody else, yes?
When I used to work at the Nut House, better known as the post office, I knew...
They're open until 7 in our place now.
I knew somebody who boasted of having thousands of sex partners in the course of their life. And he had short fuse. He could be, I befriended this person, but he could be emotionally and verbally abusive, and often was. And when I shared this with my therapist, he said, that's an example of somebody who is a quote-unquote bully coward. And I also heard the term passive-aggressive. So I have two questions. First is, do you think that a person that is a bully coward an example of passive-aggressive? And the second question starts with, I've read that the fathers of the church say that anger and perpetual, not just a flash at a moment. Anger is a sign of a bad conscience, and anger is a spiritual intoxicant. So
I might not be able to get all those pieces if you go much further, but
okay.
I got to repeat this back. So a man that you know has had lots and lots of sex partners, and he gets angry a lot, he's ill-tempered, and you're wondering if this is, what did you call it? Passive-aggressive.
And bully coward.
Like bully coward or cry bully, I've heard it, the bully coward. And what the fathers would say about, what was that?
Anger,
about anger.
being an spiritual intoxicant.
Suggesting a bad conscience.
Right.
Yes. First of all, for me, given the data that you're saying, a man who had a lot of sex partners and loses his temper a lot, I would think of trauma. First of all, I would think that this is a person who has had a lot of serious invasion in his life, and he is telling the story at the acting out level. I'll give you an example of this, and I think I can speak to what I would want to say about the fathers too, because I don't think that behavioral applications of penances and canons are the way to go. I think we have to have a much richer, complex understanding. And here's an example. A couple came to see me who'd been married 9 years, and he was a Vietnam vet, and the symptom was, the presenting issue was, he was having sex with a bunch of different women, one-night stands, the people he didn't have feeling for, and he was working overtime, a lot of jobs, so he wasn't around much. Naturally, that's going to upset the marriage. Well, it had been, 20, 30 years since Vietnam, and, this was a ramrod straight man. So I asked him to sit across from his wife and look into his eyes for 3 minutes and not say anything. Just be aware of what was inside him and look at his wife. And I said, I'm going to time you for 3 minutes. I'll tell you when it's time, and then I just want you, it's not a staring contest, I just want you to look at each other and allow yourself to experience what's evoked. The only thing I saw move on him, a lot of times people laugh and they're wiggling around and all kinds of stuff comes up. This man didn't move a single thing, and he was a soldier, except one little muscle right here on the side of his face. So that's the fish. That's where I went. And what we discovered was a man he loved very much bled to death in his arms in Vietnam. And he had never dealt with the war. And he loved when he looked into his wife's eyes, he loved her more 9 years later than he did when he married her. Which meant the veil that separated what he called the defilement that he experienced in the war and the grief he had got thinner and thinner. He was afraid that he was going to defile his wife by the filthy ugliness and moral injury and things he would hope no one would ever have to see, that was threatening to flood up in his consciousness, was going to spill out and defile her. So his utmost task at the unconscious level was not to let that happen. So his two medications were uninvolved sexual stimulation and workaholism. Yes. Are these sins? Yes. You don't want to go around having sex with other people and all, but if someone had said to him, oh, say Nicodemus the Hagiorite says this is 1 year's absence from confession for each. How many women did you have sex with? Okay. 7 years. Next. This is terrible. His wife heard this and said, you love me? And her heart was open. And now the man's challenge is to stay present while he feels his grief, his penance. Embrace the one that is so defiled that you feel is unembraceable. Now, we have to listen below the behavioral condition to find out how this soul is bravely trying to survive and also care for the people they're connected to. There's a 98% correlation between sexual addiction and emotional neglect in childhood. It's greater than physical abuse or sexual abuse. Think about that. 98%. Now, that's not causal, but it's pretty darn important to realize that when you're dealing with a hunger to be close in some way to a person and a terror of that not being met, then you want to be close but not actually show up. That's called dissociation. So we grab body parts and bodies. And really, this is almost, I had a Jesuit Catholic supervisor at one point, an analyst, and he said to me, if the person comes to you and tells you the problem is spiritual, it's sexual. And if they tell you it's sexual, it's spiritual. It was very good advice to teach me to look on the other side. We have to stop. The archangel's namesake